Hello and welcome to LOA of Unit 13 video games for Luke Vetera. The first genre I want to talk about is a RPG or a role-playing game. I will talk about the target audience first and then go into some of the codes and conventions that this genre entails. To begin with, I chose age for the target audience, and I'm going to speak about dungeon crawlers later, but the similarities between them are pretty close. So the age I went for is normally above 16 years old. This is because the general amount of RPG games that I play and that you can play are 16 or over. So they've actually been rated by PEGI. This then restricts the amount of people that the publishers can actually sell to and means that they will have to be over 16 to be able to purchase the game. Furthermore, within the games themselves, like I'm going back to the age rating, they have a lot of mature themes used. This is the case of, for example, undead, dragons, and spiders. This has a strong gore and fear aspect within this. This is not going to be effective at appealing to younger audiences just because it's going to frighten them potentially. And then, once again, PEGI is not going to allow children of this age to even buy the game, so they can't be appealed to from this, meaning it's not going to be effective at these younger audiences. Though, on the other hand, it will appeal to an older audience, and this means that you can really focus some of the trailers and some of the material in the games on these older audiences because you're not having to take into account the younger audience that shouldn't be playing the game. Furthermore, I also came up with the counter theory. Besides the fact that the age is probably going to be between 16 and 32, 32 sort of capping it because sometimes people beyond this age have children themselves and they don't have as much time for games. This means that because of obviously their age, they may not play as often. However, I would like to say as a counter argument that I believe quite a lot of people can play these games no matter what age you are. For example, the character creation stage. This means you can choose and model your character as being really old or really young, and it allows the player to empathize with their character and become, in a way, the character. And say if there was a player who is 60, 70 years old, it means they can play as themselves in the games and they're not restricted to the normal restrictions of the player creation and the playability. The next thing for target audience I spoke about was gender and religion. So for gender, again, you can sort of go back to the whole character creation. There isn't really a limit to who you can play, who you can be, meaning that whether it comes to the sex or the gender of the character, it's never actually addressed and it is never explicitly said they are this. This sort of means that anyone can play from this audiences. Though, on the other hand, within Witcher 3, you only have one character to play as, and that's Geralt of Rivia. He appears very hypermasculine because of his sort of muscles, the sort of the body shape he has. Sometimes some of the actual content within the game, especially at the start, is very sort of straight male, very hypermasculine. Though, on the other hand, once you go past the narrative that's created by the game developers, you don't really have to then follow that for the rest of the game. It's only a brief moment at the start. So whether you take a romantic relationship with one of the other sorceresses or something similar, this isn't something that you have to do. And it means that it's going to be sort of effective appealing to quite a wide range of people within that age range that I previously spoke about, just because of the lack of limitations to what you can do and the fact you don't have to adhere to some ideals within the game that may have been put in at the start. Then when it comes to religion, they use the idea of religion. It's quite a sort of an interesting concept. Firstly, you have the idea of in Skyrim with the 9 divines. So as you can see, we're playing Skyrim here, and you can then go to Whiterun, for example. So I'll quickly run up to the center of the town, and I can explain why this is sort of a key concept within the games. So as I was saying before, obviously, games don't have to include religion. It's not something that's very strong. But in the case of Whiterun, there is, for example, this up here. It's a shrine to Talos. This is one of the gods within the game. Now, the concept of religion and sort of the bonuses. So whenever you're using these shrines, your diseases are being cured, your blessings are being other blessings are being removed, meaning this is sort of your faith. I mean, for the time being. This can both appeal and not appeal to certain target audiences, mainly for the fact that if they were, say, someone who is religious, they may not like the idea that their religion is in conflict with one of these, meaning it's going to be very ineffective at appealing to this audience. However, on the other hand, if there's someone who's quite more relaxed about religion and they are religious themselves, they may find sort of comfort in the idea they can sort of fight for a god within the game, even though it may not be their own, though this is going to be a very minute amount of people. So I think it's more going to have a ineffective effect at appealing to the audience who is religious, but it will be good at appealing to people who enjoy the sort of the narrative of religion. So within RPGs, and I can now go over some of the conventions. So they sort of began off as Dungeons and Dragons games and sort of tabletop more so than video games. Later on, they were based on video games, but then based on the sort of narratives that were shown within these Dungeons and Dragons and pen and paper games. And basically, first of all, I'll talk about the narrative. So the narrative of RPGs is generally quite lax in the sense that you can decide what the player is going to do, you can decide how he will react. I can again go back to Skyrim and show you an example for this one. So as you can see, the town itself is in semi sort of ruins, and this is because I followed my own personal quest line, and that was I followed the Imperial quest line. So you can go onto here, Battle for Windhelm. This is only a quest line you can follow if you so choose to. So there are two sides you can join, Imperials or Stormcloaks. I chose the Imperials for this playthrough, and it then meant that I played sort of my own narrative. So I wasn't a Stormcloak, I played as an Imperial. That's the narrative I chose. It gives you these choices. So all of these are all optional. They all decide and sort of create an idea for your player, and they create a narrative for your player to play in, meaning it's effective at allowing anyone to play however they want. And then I'll go back to my RPG conventions. So, for example, if you were 16 to 32 and you wanted to play as a very sort of aggravated, like a valiant warrior, saving everyone you could, if you wanted to play as a thief and you were quite a sort of I don't know, in real life maybe you've reflected this who you were as a person, but the point is it doesn't matter who you are, the use of a diverse narrative and an option of choice means that it can appeal to basically anyone. I also have the example, though I won't show it here, but there's a YouTuber called Shirley Curry. She's sort of in her 70s now. She plays Skyrim daily and she uploads to YouTube. And this doesn't stop her playing, but she enjoys the scenery and creating her story as a character rather than so much the combat and the gore that is shown in Skyrim. The next thing I will talk about is sort of leveling in RPGs. So when you begin, you always begin as a sort of level 1, and the more you level up, the more abilities you unlock, and you get certain skill trees. So this can change how you will then play the game, whether you will go with, say, bombs, magic, whether you will go with swords, or if you want to be like a hunter, for example. So I can take example from Skyrim again with this playthrough. As you can see, I'm using sort of a bow, mainly just sort of bow. I have a great sword as well, so I'm sort of going with a two-handed heavy armor with the option of having a bow. And then you can see on your character, this is sort of what it looks like. Furthermore, I said about leveling up and skill trees. You can see my character is level 24, meaning they've been given 24 skill points. And then this has allowed me to sort of choose where I want to go with my playthrough, I guess. So I've wanted to be semi-healing, so I want to be able to heal myself. I've been interested in enchanting and smithing, and as you can see, the main things I spoke about, I'm focused on heavy armor, two-handed, and archery. So this is how I've decided to play because of how I've been leveling up. And for example, if I've not gone into light armor nearly at all, sneaks basically where it is, pickpocketing, I haven't chosen this as my playstyle. I've chosen other things and focused my leveling up into those other things. For the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, this is another great example of an RPG, and I can show you the leveling system in this and how it's going to be able to appeal to some of the audiences. Now, when you're playing the Witcher 3, you can see this is the build I've chosen. We can then go into my inventory and it will have the sort of armor I'm using. Then also I can go into the perks. So my character is level 53. Because of this, I can then go to my character stats, and this gives you a reflection of how I've based my gameplay. So I haven't chosen alchemy as a class at all. I've mainly gone for signs or a type of magic, as well as generally fast-paced combat, so only landing light attacks. So I haven't gone into heavy attacks and slower gameplay, as well as through the use of the crossbow. I think overall the use of this changing of classes and the way that it has meant that the audience can choose how they play through leveling has meant that again it's gone for that wide range of audience. So though it's within the fantasy genre, it's meant that whether you are quite sort of crafty with bombs, you can play like that. So someone who may have a sort of a psychographic, being a little bit sneakier as a person, they're going to be more appealed to playing with the bombs. If you enjoy fast-paced action, maybe a younger audience is going to appeal to that. So sort of 16 to 20, sort of within my demographic myself, you're going to want to play with sort of the fast-paced action rather than like heavy attacks and planning as much. There's less strategy within the game, and it's more you're playing for the combat and the thrill of the combat. Next, for RPGs, you have items and loot. So similar to dungeon crawlers, you get loot and you get sort of items within the game. And the further you go up in your level, the more powerful they become. This is quite effective at appealing to people like D&D players and people who enjoy the immersion of the lore of the items. So I'll go into Skyrim first to show you an example. You go, for example, into weapons. This is a honed ancient Nord greatsword, and it's been upgraded to exquisite quality. If I were using, say, an item I found at the start of the game, I definitely wouldn't be having as much luck now as I was. The same goes with sort of the enchantments on these. This is a unique enchantment. It really is quite immersive into the fantasy world, meaning players who are going to be playing the game for the sense of immersion are really going to be liking the way that all of these items are quite unique and lore heavy. If I go to The Witcher 3 as well, for example, my character itself, has a sword called Erendite. This is a completely unique sword you can get in the game. It has lots of lore behind it and a big quest line, as well as Vitis, which is a unique relic sword as well. And I have the Toussaint armor, which again is a unique set. However, as you can see on the left, we have these junk items that I haven't disassembled yet. Now we have this sort of sword here, the Tamer. It's level 38. You can see all of the red on the item itself. It's not going to be helping me out. And I think the way that you can then idealize and progress to the next sort of item means that you're going to be having a good experience in the game, because you really have to sort of strive for things, and it increases the playability for players with a lot of time on their hands. Sort of the last sort of three I'll go over is the idea that I'll tell you what, I'll skip character. Obviously, it can be read there, but that's just generally going over whether you make your own character or you play as Geralt, for example, in Witcher 3, you know, though this is something we have sort of touched on before, so I won't go over it. We'll go over quests and side missions next. So in The Witcher 3, for example, if we go to quests, I've completed quite a lot of the quests, except a few, and there's just a couple of sort of treasure hunts I have left, but you can see the ones I've completed, and you know, all of these are adding lore to the game. So as a player, I believe the use of lore and the way that you have sort of side quests that really give you a backstory, and you know, there's new things you can play every time, it means you have a lot of replayability for the games. This is going to appeal to audiences who do want to be able to replay the games, who have a lot of time on their hands, potentially students or people who are only working sort of week jobs. You know, that's sort of the age range going back to sort of the low 20s. Those sorts of people are going to be really sort of positively affected by the fact these games have replayability. Then also the whole idea of lore. You can see on the right hand side here, there is a lot of lore to do with each of these quests, and this means that people who like D&D players who enjoy the lore, they're going to be well affected by this also. And the last sort of thing you can talk about for the conventions, yep, is the collectible items. The good thing about the collectible items is the fact they really go back to the whole idea of striving towards something. I won't show you any examples of this. One of them you did see before was Erendite, which is a completely unique sword to get in The Witcher and needed you to do very specific things to get it. This means the players have something to strive towards, and it can increase the sort of playtime for them and their enjoyment. So that's sort of anyone and sort of anyone and anything, I guess, can do that. The only thing I will say about that is the whole idea of being able to sort of collect and show off. So these aren't games that are multiplayer, but you know, whenever someone looks at your character, you can tell through the use of sort of collectibles such as the glasses that are completely unique, the sword that's unique. It means that you as a player is able to sort of collect and sort of show off. This sort of creates quite a personal feel with the characters, and means that it's going to be effective at appealing to people who want to sort of play this with their friends. Their friends are going to be interested in it. We'll go on to sort of level design next, and then we'll also go on to camera angle. So to begin with, for level design, the whole idea of the games is there are these dungeons and there are these areas you can go to. So it's normally quite open span with little pockets that really delve deep into a sort of a dungeon, a fortress. You go in and you can't really escape until you complete it, and they normally have a big boss at the end. This is sort of shown, I can show this for example within Skyrim actually in this case. If we take sort of one of these, for example, we could do Dustman's, which one? Swindler's Den. So, you know, this is using fast traveling, which is something I will talk about in one of the other genres. But as you can see, we're playing the game, and I'll just give me 1 second. Okay. So the whole game itself is sort of open plan. This is all you can you can walk around, you know, it's all very open. But then on the other hand, if you do want to go into a small pocket and work your way through, you can. So I can just show you here. So now this is me going into a cave. This is a bandit den. There are lots of enemies in here, and they obviously drop loot. So this is completely optional. You don't have to go in here, but it is something that's going to be sort of optional when you do it. So, you know, I've passed these 2 enemies in the front here. They are quite sort of progressive. So these are only normal bandits. They're quite low level. We head off into the next room, and they are still normal bandits. So we'll go a little bit further. Sorry about that. So now we'll be walking into the next stage, and I'm trying to show you a good example. Here we go, a bandit outlaw. He's a lot more difficult, and so you can see these ones, they're taking one hit. Let's see what this bandit outlaw takes. So I am quite a little bit higher level than these people, but you can see that through the way that the game's going to get harder, it means I'm going to find more of these higher level people the further down I go into the dungeon itself. I think the whole use of the deepest depths and fighting the boss at the end is quite sort of exciting, and it's going to lead to, from all audiences, quite a preferred response, meaning they're going to sort of enjoy this idea that while they can explore, they still have challenges within the game, and even though they're free to do what they want, they can still be challenged if they need to be. The sort of last thing I'll talk about for level design is the camera angle. So there's normally two choices. There's normally a third person quite close to the action, or a first person point of view. The first person point of view in Skyrim is quite unique and is something that is extremely effective at appealing to audiences. So I can give an example now of the two points of view. The first one is this third person point of view. You can see my character running around here. However, you know, this isn't very immersive. This is quite sort of, I'm watching the player do it. Though I'm controlling them, it doesn't really mean it's me playing. If I zoom in, you know, now I'm first person. I feel more immersed. These people are, I feel like I am now the player. This has allowed me for a lot more immersion when I'm playing the games, and means that the players who are playing this for the sake of lore, immersion, experiencing the player, the D&D players, basically anyone playing the game for that purpose is going to have a really good response from this, just because of this first person. It's very sort of play as the character, become the character. However, when we see in Witcher 3, I'm never sort of using this first person, though this is very over the shoulder sort of camera angle. So I'm running around here, you know, I'm still feeling quite close to the action. It's not as bad as it's not as close as first, but I don't think this game you're trying to play as your character, you're trying to play as Geralt and sort of choose what he does. So therefore, the whole idea of a very high sort of narrative style game, you know, the use of that first person is really effective at allowing players who want to be immersed, and so forth. So for the second to last slide, we have music, and that's diegetic and non-diegetic. I think within RPGs they use lots of like sort of drums. They use this is more the non-diegetic sound. They use drums, violins, quite classical music. It creates quite an idea of grandeur within the games. This in turn actually makes the games feel more professional, meaning that, you know, they have a higher production value, higher production sort of budget feel about them when you're playing. So I'll show you a quick example, and let's just turn this up a little bit so you can have a proper listen to what it's like. Now I will quickly just focus on the music itself, so I'll be toning down effects and voice. So it has quickly cut out. I'm just moving on to a stage for a little bit later on. So I'll just quickly go back to the whole idea. So as you could see there was lots of grand noises, there was violins, it was very sort of, it was quite amazing. It was like a symphony more so. It wasn't that fast. It made me feel like I was in this time, I was in this fantasy world. This really does immerse players in the game and means that the audience themselves, they're going to feel a lot more immersed. Oh, it quickly came back. So I will just turn this down 1 second. So I think therefore that because of this immersion through the music, it really does allow you as the player to sort of feel like sort of amazed at the game. This can also be done with music, and you might have a change in pace in the music when you enter combat, and this is what I was about to show you now, and then I'll explain to why it will appeal to the audience. So let's turn the music back on, and we will only be showing music for this. So look at the way that the music changes when I enter the combat in the game. Okay. So the main thing I was sort of aiming for towards that, you could see the way that the non-diegetic music changed pace when I entered things like combat. This really ramps up the player and gives them quite more of an exciting experience. So imagine you were doing that and it didn't change. That would really have a poor effect on the audience because they wouldn't feel like they're being sort of involved in the scene as much as when you're using something like that. We'll then just quickly go on to non-diegetic sound for the last thing. So, I'll quickly just sort of run this through. So I can quickly show you in Skyrim for this one. So you can see. So just sort of listen to that. It's quite that sword swing, that's the sort of that's a non-diegetic noise. These sound effects again make us feel like we're in the game properly, and without them, we wouldn't feel immersed, meaning that the reaction from the players is going to be quite poor, just generally because it won't feel like a very professional game, and it won't feel very high production value, which is what most of the audience is going to want. To sort of conclude, I feel like RPGs are very strongly narrative based most of the time, but they allow you to choose how you want to play. And this allows for quite a unique sort of experience every time you play, meaning you always feel like it's sort of a new game when you play it. It's going to be aimed at sort of men 16 to 32. They're not really going to be religious, but they will always have a strong interest in the narrative and the monsters and the fantasy of these games, so as well as the lore, for example. And they're going to enjoy the hack and slash. They're going to enjoy getting close to the action and feeling like they're part of the story, as well as the lore that sort of comes with this. And it sort of means their immersion is going to be a lot better. And I think that RPGs, especially the ones I've shown you, have been extremely effective at appealing to these audiences just because of their very wide branching storylines and sort of the reasons I've said in the past. That will sort of be it for RPGs, and I hope you move on to the next one.